2, 1, go. When we're given an option to enter into the gaping mouth of a humpback whale with the promise of finding a lot of natural resources within their teeth, as long as we look hard enough, we don't go in. The way at which we're going to position this debate is on the importance of knowing what kind of risk and rewards you're going into. This is something that opposition contends with and agrees with. They say that, oh, yes, we're going to take this risk because we are likely to succeed because of our position as a high-achieving business graduate. And even if we fail, we're going to have this level of efficiency when it comes to their investments, meaning then that we're going to be able to use the experience from that particular field. However, we're going now to the few floating responses first before I go on to my extensions. First, the lifestyle of Wall Street is not like what we see in The Wolf of Wall Street. All the glitz and glamour of owning yachts and Lamborghinis is exactly the shiny thing that reinforces your greed and delusion that restricts your ability to make an informed decision. Second, leader of opposition is quite dismissive. We're not talking about bargaining your university, but bargaining what you have on the table. Many top students reject their careers in finance and leverage this in a medium-sized enterprise or even in startups in venture capital or private equity. And even if this is not going to be the case, I'm going to explain into my extension why that's still better. Third, the foot in the door only exists in the 50% of the time you get the offer. This is a coin flip. As an average actor, even if you are brilliant, even if you are like Albert Einstein going to physics, you do not want to take this disproportionate risk since the early decade of your career sets the trajectory of your career over the next couple of decades. Fourth, the response to Kuya Yos's POI was glib, and we think that the pursuit of greed in itself is a harm, which is exacerbated with working in a hedge fund. This lulls you into a false sense of overconfidence that can lead you to taking disproportionate risk. In fact, wanting to get returns and be a hedge fund manager can actually wreck your asset management and investing decisions because you take disproportionate risk. That is why 90% of fund managers even professionally underperform in the market. And lastly, the rise of AI models and high-frequency trading bots make hedge fund management quite challenging. Trading on insider information is illegal, and even with all of this information, actually shows you that markets are efficient, which makes it significantly harder for you to reach your targets and outperform the others. Which brings me to my extension. Let's reframe the idea of like a business graduate. Like, what are the important concepts that we actually learn? Kuya Joseph talks to you about the risk-reward ratio. This looks like weighing the amount of things you lose from a given situation because of a choice you make. For example, we're gonna lose the 10x salary potential with 50% sustainability, with 80 to 100 hours a week, or just stick to something that is more sustainable with like 48 hours per week, where we are likely to perform better. Big fish, small pond. This is something opposition also contends. We're so willing to risk it in a highly competitive market that when we just go down somewhere that's less competitive and more, or less taxing on our brain, we're also likely to perform better. And this second is this idea of like the long run versus the short run. Let's assume that ambition is symmetrical on both sides of the house. Given that you are a high achieving business graduate, how did you become high achieving in the first place? They say that, oh, you're going to be somebody who's going to be, a top asshole who's going to be able to play the fiddle. But we're going to provide you 4 things that disproves that. First, you play the long game by being consistent as opposed to probably cramming your stuff due to the high demand of business degrees. Second, you perform sensitivity analysis and SWOT analysis where you assess the potential and implicated impacts of a decision before you do it. Third, you do a bunch of simulation in your head on whether or something is or not something is going to be worth it. For example, how much am I going to gain and lose? How much of my social life will I maintain? And these are something that you can also look at examples IRL on what these people experience in general. And fourth, what this means is that being at the top of the class is not directly correlated to being the top asshole. There are many valedictorians who have a good social lives. There are a ton of Latin honor graduates who contributed to their community, like student council leaders, for example. Even in the nuance of a business graduate, they know the value of networking, maintaining good relationship with peers, etc. This premise of interest of LO is entirely gone. Now, how do we avoid career stagnation? This is my second extension. This is important because it is aligned with our understanding of playing the long game as we have learned as a high-achieving business graduate. Sure, we may opt to other business-adjacent jobs like being a financial analyst, economist, data analyst, bank analyst, etc. So they have this idea that we're going to be not able to use the offer, but what we tell you is just we're just gonna leverage this fact to have a better entry point for our salary. Like, it signals to the company that you are valuable, you are wanted. But even if this is not going to be the case, we see that all of these have very similar entry point salaries, but also have a high ceiling when it comes to the senior ones, right? The senior analysts, they have a higher salary on the long term. We already agreed that you're decent and probably above average, but we're going to prove why we survive externalities here better. Three things. First, banking data and finance analyst is not directly correlated with your performance as much as portfolio analyst. This looks like still being able to be low-key, just stay consistent with your job without the need to overperform and outmatch the other employees. Second, after 5 to 6 years, we don't deal with the 50% chance of being a second-rate portfolio analyst. We are promoted to the next level. Third, this idea of shared risks for these industries are again acknowledged on our side of the house. We're not saying that only the hedge fund industry is going to fall apart, but the fallback is largely worse on all sides of the house. No matter how much structural analysis you give on your side, the likeliness of 50%, you're still at the end of the day not stupid enough to take that risk. They're taking the extreme case that it's a moth to a flame type of situation when all the life of the actor, they've been strategic even with their academics. The comparative is that we take the delayed gratification approach instead of being a star that burns too fast. Third extension. Compass this idea on being a portfolio analyst, being a successful investor even if you fail. And they underestimate that 5 to 6 years because they don't have any idea as to how this actor can be eaten by the system. We're going to prove this burnout because the opposition loses, because there comes to a point of but we have a lot of money gets unconvincing when it's literally at the trade-off of your sanity. The perverse structure of the hedge fund industry is to keep you working and working. We're going to assume that the best case of opposition happens and that you're able to amass these high amounts of money. So what? By the time you get to this point, you already grinded away so much of your youthful years. What did this look like? Keeping you isolated at almost all times to milk every single bit of money from you. You have to traverse against other portfolio analysts who may be on or above your level. And third, during this 5 to 6 years, your life is literally dedicated to just getting money and rep from the hedge fund overlords. By the time you get to this point, you might say everything is worth it and I can finally ensure that the other portfolio analysts will be under me. There's no bit of humanity left. Our purpose is reduced to capitalistic ideal of wealth. We maintain our sanity through the maintenance of our social life through this because of the idea that we just have less hours to work on within these weeks and we have more time to spend with our families and friends. Here.